Welcome to Cultivating Food Sovereignty and Sustainability with Jacqueline Dwyer and Noel Livingston from the Toronto Black Farmers Collective. We've just been having a little bit of a chat while we've been waiting for people to join, and very excited about what they have to teach us. They are founding members of the Toronto Black Farmers Collective with a mission to grow clean food. And I'll let them take it away now. But first, I'm going to establish some group norms. So just so that we can create a community where it's easier for us to respect and honor each other and share our gifts and wisdom. So when you're not speaking, please keep your microphone on mute. When you are speaking, take your time and be as clear as possible to make it easier for others to hear you. And you can always share your questions or comments in the chat where people can read them, and I'll be able to refer to them if you want to. You can put some questions or comments, and I can bring them up when it's time for that. This session is being recorded, so you're invited to share your video if you want, and if you don't want, you can keep your camera off. And finally, we respect each other. Disagreement is natural between people, but disrespect is unwelcome. And I would step in if necessary. So thank you very much. And I'm going to let Jacqueline and Noel take it away.
Good day, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Jacqueline Dwyer, and I am one of the co-founder of the Toronto Black Farmers Collective. And we're in our 9th year of this work.
Yeah, my name is, good morning, sorry about that. My name is Noel Livingston, and I'm also one of the co-founder of the Black Farmers Collective. Like Jacqueline said, we've been on this for 9 years. We have learned a lot, and still a lot more to learn. Whatever we have, we share in terms of knowledge and anything else that is physical in terms of food. Yeah, and today we are just here to, exchange, ideas and our thoughts and what have you, and to see how we can move forward in making this world a better place, the community, our homes, our lives, and yeah.
So I will continue. And so I love the topic, cultivating food sovereignty and sustainability in the African diaspora. So let me segue into the International Decade for People of African Descent from 2015 to 2024. It's been a declaration by former Secretary Ban Ki-moon of the United Nations, December the 25th or so, or 26th, 2014, that this declaration was given the green light to start the next year. And so it's been a real challenge, not just in Canada, but globally. And so in Canada, the government of Canada, the federal government of Canada, did not acknowledge this decade until 2018. So now that we are in 2022 of this decade, entering into 2023, we have a very, very tiny window in terms of the energy of time to make this decade, give this decade a great space to actually look at issues that impacts and affect people of African descent. So when we talk about systemic anti-Black racism, when we talk about poverty, when we talk, a lot of social justice ills as they pertain, as they are, as they are something that is framed around people of African descent, the declaration itself has 3 missions. And they are recognition, justice, and development. So it's very interesting that we're talking about cultivating sovereignty, food sovereignty in this diasporic, diverse community. food is a challenge. And I must make this known onto the platform is that a lot of my folks are very proud people. So if they're hungry, they will not come and tell you that there's challenge at home to keep food on the table, or they don't have money to buy. So as we talk about this topic this morning, when we started this work 9 years ago, 2013, I'm from Jamaica, so I come from a space where food was something that we literally lived in a food forest. And so we have 14 parishes in Jamaica. I am from Kingston. Kingston is more of the engine of the island. And a lot of folks in the rural parishes would farm and bring their produce to market. My grandmother was one of those persons who would trade food in the urban space. In the city where we live, she would actually grow. And at the time, I didn't know that she was planting seeds in me. And so a lot of people in the community who didn't have a lot of money, they would come and they would take food and pay later. And so she would have a book where she would record people's name and how much they balance. And so when she is selling, she's either in downtown Kingston in 2 markets, or she would be uptown where we live. And one of the things I noticed with my grandmother, and again, seeds that were planted in me, and I never had in my wildest dream that I would be doing this, that she and the other farmers from the country, when they're leaving, so they'd be there about 2-3 days the most to sell their produce. And so when they're leaving, and if all the produce weren't gone, they barter with each other. And so whatever they needed from her, they would take, and whatever she needed from them, she would take. But at the end of that, when they're leaving, what would happen is that they would just give her the food. And so she would take a taxi with that food and come up to where we live. And she would go through her list of folks that still had outstanding monies to her. And she would make packages of the food. She would send me, because I was the privileged one who lived with her, to go and round up these neighbors and bring them. And so all of those people who owed her, she would never sell them this food. She would give them a package to take home for their homes. And I thought, wow, this is big. But I never otherwise thought anything of it. And so she would also garden. So she would grow things like yams, all the other things that we're not able to grow here. And again, when she harvests these foods, she would call the neighbors and never sell a piece. She would give it to them. And so when I came to Canada in 78, it was a real culture shock here. It was a different system. The climate was different. Everything was different. And so I noticed, again, food was that nucleus. So we had so many diverse cultures in Toronto. I've always lived in Toronto. Very diverse cultures here. And so folks would, spring, summer, and fall, you would see the diversity in food culture. So whether it was gardening, as you said, Ellen, about, having your garden in your front yard, you would see this. And so I lived in a neighborhood. At the time when I came here, I lived on Oakwood Avenue, maybe a half a block from Oakwood Collegiate. And so all my neighbors around me were Europeans. To my left were Greeks, to my right were Italians. The Italians were very friendly people. And the wife would take me and she would show me what was growing in her yard and what she would do with these fruits and vegetables, and how she made other things from them and put them in her basement, store them. And so again, more seeds were planted in me, and I just didn't think anything of it because again, we rely on an industrial food system to feed us, right? Unconditionally. And so years went by and I moved to Pelham Park Gardens. And so living there, it's a huge community and most of the community are townhouses. So I lived in one of the townhouses. And when I moved there, I was like, why do I have this big yard mowing grass and I can't grow anything? So I just started tearing up the grass one summer. And I have 2 children. So I said to them, we're going to learn. Mom is going to do something with you that you will learn forever. And they look at me strange. So we started tearing up the grass and I bought strawberry plants and I said, we're going to learn how to grow strawberries together. And so it was a very interesting thing for an activity for the young people at the time and my children. And so the strawberries did excellent. And so all the kids would come to my yard and pick the strawberries, go home and tell their parents that Jacqueline is growing strawberries and we need to start growing things in our yard too. And so the next 2 years after that, Pelham Park Gardens in townhouses, whether it was front and back, most people started growing and it beautified the community and it had more people talking and it had more people sharing. And so anywhere after I moved from there in 1999, anywhere I lived, I would continue to grow. Fast forward around 2008 or so, or around 2006, 2008, I would continue to grow. So I would call friends and who didn't have a garden or who couldn't plant a garden to say, hey, I have an abundance, come and get some. And so they would come. And then Noel and I decided that because we eat plant-based, he's been plant-based longer than I am. We would go to places like the Big Carrot to buy our organic food because now we figured out the matrix of conventional growing and clean growing. And so we wanted clean food. So we'd go to places like the Big Carrots and a few other outlets across the city, and they were getting very expensive. And I said to myself, we better learn commercial scale growing if we want to feed ourselves. And so around 2012, we were told that there was a group up in Downsview called Food Cycles, and they were doing they had an urban farm. And we're like, okay, we went and checked them out. We connected with other community gardeners and we took a day tour and we went up there and we loved what we saw. But, when you depend on funding, the rug can be pulled from you, from underneath you anytime. So the year when we went, they were waiting on their funding and their funding didn't come through.
That's true.
And so Fresh City Farms, who are now one of the main player on the stage right now out there in terms of organic food and an electronic platform where you can go and buy food, stepped in with about 4 other co-founders, and they took over the urban farm. So 2012, we went there and we started like buying our food from another farmer. His name, Damien Ajuda, was a great grower. And so he grew a tremendous amount of food. And so we would go on a Thursday and pay him and harvest what we wanted. And he would say to us, you guys are real troopers. You come, you harvest your food, you pay me. You're the first. Since I've met you, you guys are the first one who come, pay me and harvest. So you sort of open up my market for the weekend. And so I said to him, we both said to him one day, we'd like to do this on a commercial scale for just, our own consumption. How can we get involved? And he said, well, they usually do sort of like a list. So I'll add your names to the list. And he added our names to the list for the end of 2012. And I guess we were the first one on the list, and our energy attracted about 25 other people. And so that year, 2013, was a very fruitful, prosperous, happy year of food in Downsview Park at the Keel Street and Shepherd Avenue west side of the park, where there are 3 large greenhouses on the lot. They've been an urban farm there for a number of years. And the practice there is, they say organic, we say clean. And so that year, when we started out on 1,000 square foot, it was amazing how tall the kales were, how big the turnips and the carrots and the beets were, the tomatoes, everything that we grew were lush, and it came in an abundance. And again, what my grandmother used to do, I started doing it. So I'd call folks in and I'd say, oh, we have so much food, come and get some. And most of these households were, low income or, underemployed household. And so folks would come and happily, harvest food for themselves. And then we started looking into it deeper, and we're like, well, if we're doing this and we're reaching out to folks and sharing, and there's so much people showing up, then there is obviously a need to do this. And so 2013, we went through a very nice season. We learned about the Black Creek Community Farm, which is at Jane and Steele's. I opened up that farm in 2013, in the summer of 2013. And Noel and I both worked there. I worked there for 2 years. He worked there for a year. And they sit on an 8.5 acre urban farm in the city. 3.5 acres of that land is farmable. And so throughout my 2-year tenure, the first year was all the administrative, planning, bringing the community together, bringing partners together, bringing resources to the table. And then the second year, I opted out of being in the office and getting into the fields. And again, 2014 was a gangbuster year to grow food there. Food were everywhere. We had food planted in the front yard. So that farm has 2 entrances, the house entrance and the field entrance. And everywhere you looked, it was an abundance of food. And so for 2 years, that project was anchored on giving community an opportunity to be food secure, to talk food sovereignty, to talk food justice, to talk food security, to create safe space, to build programming through food so that that Jane Finch community could be better in terms of access to good, healthy food. And so this project was set up like a flagship project. And so they had a lot of donations, monies given to the project. The project was a gangbusters. It was a rock star project. And so during my 2 years, Noel and I said we need to ask for an acre of this land so we can start to do cultivating food sovereignty with not just our community, but with the community that reside there. And so most of the people, Jane Finch is a very huge and diverse community. Most of the folks that live up in Jane Finch, they all have housing. They either own their own property or they lease or rent. And the low income folks live in apartments. And so there's a lot of that up there. And so we saw the need again, and we approached the steering committee for the Black Creek Farm project, and we said, can we have an acre of this land? And they kept on giving us a dance and a sing. They didn't want the community into the farm, and they didn't want structural programs that addresses food insecurity and food poverty from that project. And so after 2013, 2014, they gave us a long spiel, and we said, okay. They said that we couldn't have the land. They were going to build the land, build the soil, so we couldn't have the land. So we said, okay. We went back. We emailed the now CEO of First City Farms, and we said, we have $400. We need actually about half acre of land to come and start to develop what we need to do. And he said, okay, we know you guys, what's going on over there? Because they were also a project partner on that project. And we said, these are the things. And, here the growing season is very short, so we're not going to hang around. We need to get started. And he said, okay, come. And 2015, he gave us 1,000 square foot at the Keel Street and Shepherd Avenue side of the park. And we developed on the southeast corner of the park, where they now have a whole community of condominium townhouses and condos. We developed about a 2.5 acre urban farm over there. We planted everything. And let me tell you, everybody showed up. We had people who loved the idea of what we did there. We had residents watching the farm when we weren't there. We didn't even know that, and protecting it. And we had a diverse group of people coming in, whether people were, fighting cancers and they needed to eat organic and couldn't because after they paid their rent or their mortgage and took care of other personal responsibilities, they didn't have money to buy clean food. So we created a program where folks would come and either a weekly program or a bi-weekly program, and they would come and harvest and use that food for healing. And so this is why we emphasize clean. That those same folks who were very ill became very healthy again. And over the years to present, we have been truly and divinely blessed to do what we do. I wouldn't say privilege, I'll say blessed, because when the monies weren't coming in, the divine heavens made sure everything we did was very bountiful, very successful, and only brought all the sources and the resources to us that was vital and important to move us from one stage to the next. And we started looking at it and smiling and clocking all the greatness that we saw. And we said, this is only done divinely. It's not done down here, it's done in the heavens. We're just the bodies that were carrying out the task of the divine heavens. And so to present, we have been truly blessed and highly favored. I will leave it at that, and I will let Noel give his piece because he also has a story. Thank you.
Okay. This is why she's a spokesperson for the Black Farmers Collective, very detailed, sell good, real good stories and all of that. I'll just recap some stuff, touch on a few pointers. So I grew up in a farming and military community. Everybody knows everybody. My family had quite a bit of land, and so I didn't even realize that most of the people there were actually family members, because everybody's cousins and uncles and what have you. Fast forward, so I did not have a need at the time or see the need to grow food. I had no idea how to put a seed in the ground because everything was in abundance around me. My father was a professional farmer with the government, and we used to have this show called the Dembi Agricultural Show every year. It's an annual thing, and livestock and foods from all over the world. As far as Israel, I've seen tomatoes this big that was grown in the sand. The irrigation system was pretty good. So scientifically, their approach was one that today Israel is feeding its nation easily. I was not very interested in farming. My thing was politics at the time. I wanted to be an engineer, but when my mom died, a lot of things changed. And so I decided that we want to take care of our father because he was really grieving. The entire family was, but he was really impacted. So we, stayed very close to our dad. So both of our parents were really good to us. And so my thing was, farming wasn't a big deal. So when I moved to the Cayman Islands, I worked for a family there for a while. And that was the first time I put a seed in the ground. That didn't come out too good because I had no idea how to grow food. Fast forward, came to Canada. I was always, actually, when I was in the Cayman Islands, I was actually a vegan. Once in a while, I might eat a piece of fish because that was everywhere. But when I came here, I realized that the food didn't taste the same way. It looked like an apple, tastes like an apple, but the nutrients was not there. Not bashing the food that we're getting here, but you could taste the difference. It could be because of the limestone that I'm used to. My dad used to joke around that if you spit on the ground, it will grow because the land was very fertile. I realized that I could differentiate poverty in Jamaica and poverty here. And I've gone into communities where people didn't have anything. Back home, we consider ourselves to be poor, but we had a house, we had land, but there was no industry. And the reason why I wasn't, interested in politics for a while, I did politics in school, because I could see where there was a lot of destabilization. I could tell of instances where there was food everywhere, but people were still hungry because the monopolization of food was very obvious in Jamaica because of politics. It's such a disgusting situation even now that there's so much food there and yet people are hungry. I won't get into the intricacies of politics there, but just to give you an idea. So when I met Jackie, I'm an artist too. So we were doing an arts program. That's how I met her. A project.
Yeah.
And, again, I know what it is to go to the big shows where thousands upon thousands, I can see people. And what I see, the connection away from just music was food. And we always joke around that food, music, and women. As an artist, you see a lot of that. And so we connected somewhat because, like-minded people, and we saw the need of, and the fact that we were privileged to get good food at the time when we were growing up, and opposed to what we see now, we thought more or less that we should be able to address it. Although when we got into it, we got into this innocently. We did not understand the politics and the evil that exists within the food justice arena. She had touched on quite a few points, so I don't need to reiterate, but what we're doing now is about community. We are called the Black Farmers Collective because we experienced something that was very apartheid. And you might say those are strong words, but we experienced apartheid at Black Creek Farm.
Yes.
And I know of instances where we go to the so-called farmers market, and people look at me and say, I go to, I remember this guy, I said, I need 2 heads of that cabbage. And he looked at me and like, it's very expensive. In other words, you can't afford it. I understand where it's coming from because that's the reality, the culture. So our work right now is to use food as that nucleus, that food as a magnet to bring people together, because we speak the same language when it comes to food. We all eat food, and it's something that we eat every day. So if you're talking about sustainability, and unfortunately it's thrown in this class structure, and we see it everywhere. We did a food justice tour with some students once, and we just asked them to do one thing. We took them to 3 different locations. We took them to Loblaws, mom and pop store, and I think it was Farmers, one of those other places. And in 10 minutes, they could literally document what they saw, the difference when it comes to food justice, and how they're treated. Jackie mentioned briefly about the stickers on the and the significance of those stickers on the different produce. So what we are doing now is to see how we can best, all of us, to address this. How can we do that? Is to educate ourselves. My approach in the farm is from a scientific, perspective, where we look at how food is grown, but the question is not if you can grow food, but what kind of yield you can get. So, no matter how small the space is, I try to figure out how can we maximize the space and get a good yield. So I'm not an agronomist, but from an agronomist's perspective, if you look at the soil, it's very important. So our work is dependent on the divine. It's not how eloquent we are or how skilled or educated we are, because food works with nature. Good food works with nature. So you might be a good farmer, but if the rain doesn't fall, if the sun doesn't shine, you're in trouble. And so we do all these researches, and that's all great, because we need to understand that we have a lot of people to feed, and how can we best grow food and to make that nutritional. So our bellies are normally full, but we're still malnourished because we're not getting the nutrients. If you notice, I'm all over the place, because I don't want to spend time elaborating on it, but just to give you a picture, to paint a picture of the things that we are doing and the things that we all need to do. I'm going to shut up in a minute and to say one thing, that it's incumbent on all of us to be at the table and to make decisions that's going to impact all of us, because there is not a food contingency plan. The government does not have one. We experienced that with COVID. It's very emotional, and I'm not going to go through it, but I've seen people that are hungry and children hanging on to the dress or the pants of their parents, looking up in their faces. And I say, I'm hungry. And we don't have a lot because we don't get a lot of money, but we started this from our pockets. But we share whatever we have, whether it be knowledge or physical food. And we're reaching out to everyone to say, let's work together. I hear people, oh, I don't have a green thumb. Well, all of us have green thumbs, or we don't have them, because it's a God-given talent, I think, that we're all given to grow something. It might not be on a large scale, a commercial scale, whatever, but we are all given the ability to grow food. So that's a poor excuse for us to say that we can't put some tomatoes or, something in the backyard. So what knowledge we have, we share it with community and individuals. And I think this is the right time. This is a new dispensation. The world has changed politically, spiritually, and otherwise. And we have to connect with our Creator and our ancestors, and to learn, humble ourselves, and to learn from each other. And this is a way to break down barriers and to build bridges. I'm going to shut up. Thanks.
So thank you, Noel, for sharing your journey and your lived experience. And it's all about the journeys we have and the lived experience we've gathered over the years. And people say privilege. I don't look at it as a privilege. I look at it as something divinely that I was put here to do, a part of my assignment. And so, communities connecting, collaborating, and partnering on food production, distribution, food programming, land access, resource sharing is extremely vital if we are going to address the issues of food poverty and food insecurity across the GTA. We, Toronto Black Farmers Collective, we're in 33 neighborhoods here in the city. And as you can see, it's 2 of us. So we have very strategic partnerships with community leaders across 33 neighborhoods. We also have a partnership with Country Heritage Park in Milton, on the north side of Milton. They are, they're an agricultural society. They're all white folks. And when they heard about us and what we do and the struggles we had in city for land, we were invited by the CEO of the park, Jamie Rumey, who actually ran the Holland Marsh for a number of years and also helped to restructure the Ontario Food Terminal. So this man has a wealth and breadth of knowledge as it pertains to the industrial system. The section of the food terminal where you go now and you're able to buy from local farmers, those are all his inputs. Those are all his work. And we have had the privilege of being able to go to the terminal and see all of this in real time, meet all the players, all the big wigs. And we know that the community still has a lot of work to do down here. The terminal is great. It's our food airport. It's fantastic. And they've done a lot of work down there. But right now, the community has to get active and proactive, not reactive, and start to build tangible systems within the confines of these neighborhoods that we are all connected to somewhere or another. And so our work that we've been doing over the 9th year, going in our 10th year, is to continue to build strategies, build relationships. Now we have a partnership with York University. We're changing our side of the urban farm into a climate solutions park, because now the new anomaly is the changed climate. It's not changing, it's changed. Fall started August the 1st this year, and it went over many people's heads. But as a tiller of the soil, I immediately felt that difference. And I was like, wow, the planet has changed. And so we have to adapt. Now we really only have 2 hot months to grow. So crop rotation is extremely vital and important. Again, partnerships, everybody taking a piece of the crop plan and growing as much as you can in your neck of the neighborhoods, and harvesting and sharing that food, and also agro-processing that food is extremely very, very viable. So we Black farmers are saying that we're open to partnership. We're open to folks who come to the table readily to do the work, and folks who come to share or bring resource or bring money, tools, equipments. They're all very, very, very important part and parcel of this process. The learning is always hands-on. We do workshop trainings. We're going to be taking off this this season. My mom passed away last year, December, so I was busy with all of that and missing and mourning my mother, my matriarch, I call her, who brought me here, who gave life to me and brought me up until last year when she transitioned. So we have a responsibility to ourselves as individuals, but we also have a broader responsibility to each other. And these responsibilities are tentacles that we must grow to change the dynamics on the ground that continue systems to allow people to live in poverty, allow people to experience violence on a day-to-day. This is what this International Decade for People of African Descent is all about. It's all these member states across the world were supposed to take this decade, go back to their home countries, and to dismantle these colonial systems of violence. And many people have not done that because they still want to continue the status quo. Now, the heavens have said, enough is enough. We're not going to do that anymore. Everything has changed. Whether our governments wants to speak the truth, whether people want to acknowledge that the responsibility of individual must now be tangible and actively engaged with each other to make the changes, is not a yes or no. It is happening, and we're seeing it in our daily lives. We're seeing it in the systems. We're seeing it right across the board, right across the sector, right across the world, what is happening. And so it is my responsibility, your responsibility to ensure that something as food, every animal, every insect, and I've seen them at the farm. This year, we had an invasion of groundhogs. They were everywhere and they were eating well. We had rabbits coming out of the trees. I don't know where they were coming from. Rats, everybody. We also noticed a new phenomenon. And if this happens on a larger scale, we are all cooked. The bees are dying in bundles. That's something that we must address if we want to grow sustainably local. In our greenhouse, we're right in the intersection of Keel and Shepherd. And we don't know what is happening in the environment, whether it is natural or mechanical, but something is not happening right. And in the last part of the summer, first early part of the fall, we noticed the bees. If you come into our greenhouse, we have peppers about 4 or 5 feet, pepper trees tall because of how we're growing in our greenhouse. And all the bees, they just come in and they're pollinating, and we're seeing all this production of hot peppers and sweet peppers and herbs. But one thing we noticed was the bees would go up in the roof of the greenhouse, which is plastic and it's hot up there. And sometimes they would come down on the table that we sit around, and they would just go around in circles, and they look stunted, like they can't balance, they can't hold themselves up. And then a few days after, you leave and go somewhere, go to do something, and when you come back, you just notice a bundle of bees just died. And I'm like, what is going on here? I reached out to a conservationist and a biologist. I learned yesterday from another professor that she's on sabbatical. So I'm going to make this an SOS for everybody on this call, on this Zoom, to look into conservation methods away from just planting pollinator gardens, which are great, to look at other methods and systems that we can help our bees to survive and to populate, because if they die, we're truly going to have a problem, because there is no hand pollination that is going to give you what you need without the bees being a very, very intricate part of that process. And we're seeing a lot of our bees dying, and there's no explanation. We're asking questions, and people are very evasive and push back. They don't want to say they're doing a job, and I understand that. But at the end, if we don't do what's right, we're all going to suffer. Not one group, we are all going to suffer. So again, cultivating food sovereignty in our community is important and vital. And I hope that anybody who are from the diasporic African community on this Zoom, think about the long-term impacts of dismantling oppression. We do that through food, but people have different works that they do. So always come with a lens of dismantling what is not good, because it's not taking us anywhere fast, and we're not able to work together in an honest way to do what we are supposed to do as human beings on the planet. And if we're not doing that, we're going to have serious problems moving ahead. So again, we are open to partnerships. We're open to collaboration. We're open to sharing our knowledge, our experience, our trod. And we are still learning because of what we have adapted our urban farm to do this year. So we've started putting in infrastructure for sustainable energy, which is solar energy. We have a lot of that. We have a lot of sun. So we want to put that sun to work. We're creating spaces on our farm to allow for more community engagement and involvement, and to actually have real-time conversation about climate change. And climate change, in the way I look at it, it's not just the climate being mean, it is the way we live and exist and the things we use and how much of it we use to pollute. And also spiritually, what we carry as peoples, what we have to dismantle, and how we better should be treating each other. I think that's also a part of the change climate, and it's not going to go anywhere until we adapt and do better. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much. And I am sure that there are people who have questions and want to engage in some dialogue here. I will just say for myself that I absolutely loved when you said all of us are given, God-given the task to grow. And that is, in fact, the first command in one of the first commands in Genesis is that God puts human beings in the garden to till it and keep it. And I just love that. It's so central to what we do. I know that there are people around here who are from parishes that have gardens and parishes that want to have gardens. And I'm going to let people talk about it some more.
Okay.
So open it all up. Please unmute yourself and ask questions.
I'm just curious how you define food sovereignty. What does that
mean to us?
To you, or like how is that defined?
To the community. So
yeah.
Sovereignty really ties into the land. And if you don't have access to land, there's no development, there's no creation, right? There's no building, there's no end product if you don't have access to land. And so we're seeing more of that in this metropolis, the city of Toronto, where the land is just being gobbled up very busily by developers. And that's okay, because we need more new built modern infrastructure, but there is no space created for, environmental use. So not only farming, but planting trees, creating food forests or places to garden and just to relax and unwind from everything that's going on around us. We don't have that anymore. And it's very, very far and few when you meet a developer who actually sees the big picture and knows that this is their role, but there is other spaces in the picture that needs to be addressed. And so land and sovereignty to land, access to land, or affordability, or long-term leasing, or different models of how we engage and share the land, it's not really being talked out in communities right across the city. It happens in some community, but not a big conversation in all communities. So one of that piece is that we have so many parks across the GTA in Toronto. We have lots of parks, right? They're zoned for recreation, but we need to go back and visit those policies and modernize them, because they're not modern. We are in modern times, quote unquote, and our policies and legislation needs to be modern. So in that case, these lands, these parklands, and also golf courses needs to be rezoned in a way where, X amount of it can go to developing, urban farms, fruit and nut orchards, and planting herbs and doing quick cash cropping throughout the growing season. Because again, the food bank is not going to cut it. It was only a temporary measure that was put in place but now it's become something of a long-term measure. And even the food bank, when we speak to like directors and whatnot, they are stressed. Even though they're getting all this money, their staff is getting sick because people have to do so much more than they're able to. And so when we have land where people can have access and start to develop and to do not territorial growing, but more collective growing, where we can actually use these produce to do things and create our own communal byproducts of the food, I think we will be in a better and more healthier position.
I'll just add to that question. My dad used to tell me that the wealth is in the soil. So our land, the way that our foreparents set it up, I don't care how many wives I have, how many husbands my sisters have, we can't sell it. It stays there. And so, unless you don't pay the tax, that's another story with the government. But, and it's, unfortunately, this is politicized, because when you look at the monopolization of land here, who has it? Who have access to it? We own a farming business, but we don't own land. We don't own a farm. That's what we talk about. The emphasis is on sovereignty, accessibility, and the whole issue on how we can afford resources and what have you, and products. So to your question, this is why it's incumbent on all of us to sit at the table and be honest, because sometimes one might ask you a question and they don't necessarily want to hear the answer, the right answer, the truth. They just want to hear what they want to hear. So it depends on what the topic is. I'll ask the person, do you really want to know what I have to say? Do you want to really hear my honest opinion? Because we've been dancing around this for too long. Sovereignty is important, because if it's going to be long-term lease or you own the land, because we are right now in a dilemma where we cannot build infrastructure, the right infrastructure, because we don't own the land. And ownership is a huge topic, because it's not really so much owned, because we are stewards here. The Almighty Yahweh put us there for a reason, to be steward in the garden, but we have been bad stewards. And so we want to own everything, but our job is not to own, is to control it. And there are no checks and balances in how we operate. So this is why we're in a dilemma right now, because whether on a governmental basis or whatever, individual, some people hoard the lands because they don't want certain people to be a part of that. So the time has come when a lot of us going to be very uncomfortable, because the truth that was pressed down to the ground is rising. And only the people that are connected to the divine one, and I'm not talking about who are Christians and Muslims, no, I'm simply saying our spirituality, because there is a divine one. And if we can adhere to those precepts and laws, then we'll understand how we operate and navigate. When we approach the land, we see it as a woman with child. And we know the process from, sexual intercourse until now. But the whole point is that we treat it that way. That's how the divine created everything. And so we're not the smartest. We're simply saying we have to adhere to those principles. And if we do that, then we can address all these issues that we're having. Not difficult.
I have a question for Jacqueline and Noel. My name is Gary Gannon. I'm a coordinator of a food bank out in Whitby, Ontario at All Saints Anglican Church. And I may have missed this in your presentation. I apologize if I'm asking this again, but does your farm have any relationships with food banks that are established in your general area in Northwest Toronto?
Established? No, because, and correct me, because when I look at the word established, I'm looking at something that is structured in paper and what have you. But do we reach out to? Oh yeah, just about everybody. The problem with that is, especially amidst this COVID thing, a lot of those banks, they were closed down. We operated right through the year because why?
Through COVID.
Because we're out there and the social distances wasn't a problem, because although we had so many people within the Black Farmers Collective scope, it was just 3 or 4 of us who were growing food.
Yeah.
So social distances wasn't a problem. And Jackie and I, we live in the same house. So what's the deal, So we were able to do that with a privilege. But to your question, yes, we do have, because we collaborate and we partner, but to say if we have a specific food bank that on paper that we support. And it's because we don't really get a lot of support too, because when we started out this, it was very, very modest. We started out with $40. And when we got a couple of grants, I remember the first, that was big for us, $10,000. We bought tools because we said, you know what if we don't get any grant next? Because we know how, it's so politicized. And so be it. Yeah. 2 years passed, we didn't get anything, but what? We had tools, and we had access to some land. We build our stock, our seeds and all of that. Everything we grow that is possible, we save seeds. And today we are here in a better situation, not the best, but we thank the Almighty God that we are here now, that we can sit and talk with you and say, this is what we're doing. This is what we have accomplished, and so much more we can accomplish together.
And also too, like when we grow food and we have an abundance and we call up food banks, and it doesn't matter if they're in Toronto or outside of Toronto, the first thing they're telling you, like we say, we want to donate 20 crates of carrots. They're like, you got to bring it to us. Or like, well, we don't have that resource. So if you guys want it, food banks have all of this money. They have all this equipment. You can come and pick up 20 crates of locally grown carrots to be served to the people, the recipients who you're trying to feed. So it's a problem with, again,
it's distribution.
Their infrastructure inside and who they have access to be able to come and pick stuff up in Milton. So over the 9 years, we've learned, Gary, that food poverty in the urban is very, very different from food poverty in the rural. In the rural, they would take the food, they would pre-pack the food, and they would take it and drop it off at the destination points, and folks would drive and pick it up. In the urban space, you know where you go to pick up what you need, how, when this space is open, at what time, how much you can get, how many time you can go for the month. Very, very different in the rural. It's not like that.
It's proximity.
And so, again, when we grow food, because we are commercial growers, when we grow and we have an abundance and we call upon food banks to say, hey, this is how we got connected to 33 neighborhoods across the city. When we do call out to our community leaders, they just do an SOS and they said, hey, we have 30 food insecure seniors. We need X amount of this produce. We need some of that. We even bring in eggs from Milton, and we bring in chickens that they raise there. And so throughout COVID, throughout the 2 years of COVID, we were operating. We gave over 5,000 hampers. And when we say hampers, we mean real hampers.
Culturally appropriate stuff.
People loved it because they're like, we've never seen whole free-run chicken in a hamper, farm fresh eggs, herbs, seasoning, spices,
yams from the
organic fruits, all of this. We put everything in there because we knew that people lost jobs, couldn't go to work, had families, were stressing about accessing food here and there. So when we gave you a hamper, you were good for a good 2-3 weeks. And so this year in Downsview where we grow, we still have carrots in the ground. We haven't fully harvested yet. We planted our garlic, but we haven't fully harvested. We still have a whole 1/4 acre of kale, dino kale and curly kale. And so the kale is so faithful and so blessed, and it loves this weather. So it just looks really beautiful. But you know, we sell some, and whenever folks come and they need, we just give it to them. But to get the food banks to come and say, we're coming to pick up 100 bunch or 200 bunch to add to what we have, it's an issue. They can't come.
And the thing is too, let's be honest here, like, we are lacking in resources. And when you go to these governmental bodies, there's so much bureaucracy. It makes you tired and frustrated, because during COVID time, we didn't have a transportation. You know who helped us? The cops.
Yeah.
And we thought it was the best thing, because in our community, there's an issue with the relationship with police, especially with Black men. And so we're saying to them, listen, if you want to say that you want to make that relationship better, you need to know how we live.
Yeah.
So you have the resources and all of that. I don't want to get into the politics with how they get money, but they were able to use their vehicles to distribute the food for us.
Yeah.
We don't go to communities and tell them what they want. We ask them what they want. And we say, this is where we are. You can pick it up, and that's all it is. We don't go, we're not nobody's savior. We're trying to save ourselves. But we can show some love by being practical and realistic and say, this is what we have. Do you have the resources to pick it up? And that's what we do. So officially, we don't really have any connections with individual food banks or any specific one, but communities, oh yeah, we go out there and we share what we have.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I know that at All Saints Whitby, where Gary is from, he just spoke, they do also, they have just in the last 2 years, I think, have started a community garden, and I believe that produce goes to your local food bank that you also run. Is that correct?
It does, yes. We're just finished our second year, and we use the produce that we grow in our garden to supplement the foods that we hand out twice a week to people who come to us in need.
And how much do you grow? Like how big is your garden?
It's relatively small compared to yours. We converted a former playground. We had a Montessori school that was an anchor tenant in our church, and they closed down. And so 2 years ago, with support from the diocese, we started a community garden. So it's approximately a 50-foot by maybe 70 feet by 15.
That's good. It's pretty good.
Planned.
We started out that very modest too.
Yeah.
And again, we are homeless because we don't own land. We don't have land. So, we have access to the space. And we, at one time, even past 2-3 years, we were growing food in Downsview, in Milton, and in Schaumburg.
3 spaces.
That was so difficult, and that place out in the East End that we were helping with again.
Yeah.
That's another space too. So why we're all over the place? Because we don't own land. And the politics is so entrenched that we just say, you know what, whatever we have, we work with it. And fortunately for us, I think we're at a very strategic point there, space there at Downsview, because it's a real connector because of the community there, and there's so many different ethnic groups.
Diverse.
And this is why it's important for us, because when we're growing at the south side in Downsview, there were some older folks from the European community. And, we were there weeding, and they're looking at us like, what are you weeding? Why are you doing that? It says, it's weed. It says, no, we eat it. You see how important it is for us to share knowledge and stop, we need to stop thinking that we're so smart. Because there are others who are smarter than us and who know more. Let's share the knowledge and make that inclusive. So I don't want to see a community garden with only African people or only Caucasians. I want to see it with everybody. We're here for everybody, all ethnic groups. People throw in our faces, oh, you call it Black Farmers Clinic? Isn't it like the Black Panther? No, we don't have time for that. We are here to address humanity. The issues that we are all impacted, whether we like it or believe it or not, we are all impacted. The last time I checked it, we breathe the same air. And the Creator, when it falls in rain, it falls on all of us. The sun, same thing. So let's try to get rid of those barriers and start building bridges to address our problems, because we have a problem.
Yeah. And one of the issue that I've seen over the 9 years and just been touring different food spaces, not per se in the city because we know quite a bit of them, but like more in like say Niagara and other spaces, like a lot of native species of food are dying out.
Yeah.
And they're dying out because the climate has changed. The young folks who their parents holds these farms, they're not interested in agriculture. And so when they move into the city, they're not going back. So a lot of the work that it takes to maintain and to upkeep these farms, the farms are dying. We went to a fruit and a nut farm in Niagara, and it's so sad. That's the only remaining one.
Yeah.
Where we see native pawpaw trees that looks like our mango, but it eats like a custard. We see heart nuts, like little kids, like when they come to our site and we show them these things. So they look at us strange and we're saying, it is native to here. It is food for here. If we should stop importing, or our governments decide that they don't want to trade with each other, a lot of the things we now enjoy will not be on our table. So we need to keep the native, whether it's medicine, whether it's vegetables, fruits or nuts. And besides that, Canada was once upon a time a great producer of grains. That's not happening anymore. So most of what we get are imports, highly toxic, radiated, and it's making people sick. He is one of them. He cannot eat any nuts that comes in here because it goes through radiation, and the toxicity of that radiation makes him sick. So again, food security is not just, feeding our stomach, but also ensuring that we upkeep, or we move the margins out of continuing to build on the native platform that we have here and really develop them formally again, because in the world at large, everybody is trying to, look in their own borders. They don't care about you. They're looking in their borders, they're producing what they can. And sometimes many of what they send to you is very toxic. I'd say about maybe now 7 years, somebody sent me a video of a farm in Costa Rica, like small scale farmers. And so these guys were focusing on like the hot crops, like pumpkins, tropical pumpkins, okra, and a few other things. And they were literally showing a video of the okra being grown on the tree. They harvest the okra and they were dipping them in dyes, right? And sending it to spaces like here. They were injecting silicone in the stem of the squash and the pumpkins. So this is why so many of us have become so intolerant to what we're eating. And so it is extremely vital that if there's 10 of us on this call and we create a collective crop plan, if we can grow 3 crops each that we can share in abundance, that is awesome. Because whatever you go into the store and take your hard-earned dollar to buy, you don't know how safe it is. And they can tell you about organic till the cows come home and lay down. I don't trust that if I am not the grower, because I know what my principles are and I have to eat that stuff. And so when folks come to the farm and they see a lot of things around us and they're like, you guys don't spray. No, this is an organic farm. We might not be certified in terms of the documentation, but our practices are, and we have to eat this. So it is extremely important that, the community of growers that are here learn that you can operate from a collective crop plan. And in your part of wherever you are, your region or your city, whatever can do well there, you produce that and you share that and so vice versa. And so you will have an abundance.
I think the issue here with the food situation is that if we can come up with a system that, because I guess the point I'm trying to make is that in the summertime we grow food, but after that season's done, what do? We do workshops and to show people how to help to alleviate some of that issue with food access, where you can start create byproducts of the food that you grow. That's what we do. And so in the winter time, we have quite a bit of food because whatever we grow in the summer, we create byproducts. If you want to sun dry a tomato, and you can sun dry just about everything, you just hydrate it when you're ready for it, right? We might not have the equipments to do that, but in whatever modest way. So that will help to and if you look at it economically, you bring the prices down of food. But when it's monopolized by a specific corporation or company, whatever, then they throw a price at you and they know that you don't have food, so you have to buy it.
You don't have a choice.
But if all of us do that, and I think the church is in a very powerful position because you're really the conscience of the nation. It's time for the church to say to the government, because you are the conscience of the nation, and to say, listen, this is what we need to see happen, and we can be a part of that process. How can we work together? The church has a strong voice. We're not hearing it very much because I think everybody's working in silo with all these different denominations, but if there's one God, I don't see we should have a problem to even sit at the table and talk to each other. Might have doctrinal differences or whatever theories, but the idea is that I think we can. It's possible that we can sit and address these issues, and the government will listen. It's just like the musicians. It's instruments of players and singers of songs. They talk to the government, to the nation, and they listen.
Yeah.
The church has that voice.
Yes.
And the message is that, because I can tell you, there are some messages that us musicians put out there, it's not good. So can you imagine if we use that same energy in a positive way?
Yeah. What will happen?
What can happen? There are changes.
That's right.
We can do it.
Well, thank you so much again. And I don't know if anyone else has any last questions or comments.
I do.
Oh, Judith.
I just wanted to say thank you. I've learned so much today. And I had one question and I'm not sure who mentioned it, but about the food terminal. Were you talking about the food terminal on the Queensway?
Yes,
And,
the Ontario Food Terminal.
And what is your connection with them?
So our partner in Milton actually ran that terminal, was the chairman of that terminal for 5 years. And so a lot of the modern infrastructure in the terminal was implemented by him. And so when we now see Ontario local farmers that actually can go and compete with all the importers, that's a bonus. And you can go and buy your local garlic, pumpkins, whatever you want, your fruits that are local right there. It is an absolute improvement to what it was before. So as Noel said, we all have a voice, and we just had a municipal election. And again, we never mention anything about food. That should be front and center to our politicians and decision makers, that this is very, very important. And these are very, very crucial and important times that we ensure now that we can sustain ourselves as it pertains to food within our borders. As we consume food, minimum 3 times a day, right? So it doesn't matter what ethnicity we are, what culture we are, whatever can be grown here should be grown here. And we've been at this for 9 years and been saying the same thing over and over. We should not be bringing in a lot of stuff that we are growing here. That should be grown here, hands down. We should ensure that farmers are doing what's right in terms of the quality of food that we're getting, non-toxic food, you know, it should be done here. Why is that not happening? Why are we not holding them accountable?
There's food and there's food. Okay, I never had any allergies, food allergy, and all of a sudden I developed that. Anything that is radiated, because a lot of our grains, because my diet for years has been plant-based and grains. Someone says you're like a goat, you just eat grass. And you know, I've traveled from here to Calgary and I survive on nuts and fruits and water. And again, because of my diet, if the food is contaminated, my system knows immediately, because now you literally change that DNA to something that is not foreign to your body. So anything that is foreign, your body's going to react to it. That's what happened. So if I eat almonds, I can't just go out there and eat any almond, because I'll get stuffy, you know, and I'll get itch because it's contaminated. So can you imagine if we go back to how it was in the beginning, like the sister mentioned earlier, where everything in its natural form is consumed? Because food is our medicine. Good food is our medicine. The food, unfortunate, that we're consuming is making us sick. What do we get? We go to the drugstore and we wonder why we don't get better. But you just got some more drugs. Shoppers Drug Mart and all these big corporations didn't tell you they're giving you medicine or herbs. They said they're giving you drugs. Why are you complaining? You're getting drugs. The food is the medicine in the herbs. And in Canada, a lot of us are so ignorant of the natural wild foods that is right here. It pops up out of the ground. We didn't have to do anything to it. It's here. So it's all of us now have to put in our little bit, our effort, and to find where these foods are, these resources are, and we can make ourselves better. So the food terminal, one time, if you didn't have a company registered, you couldn't just go get food. Now the local farmers, that's what Jackie just mentioned, that some of them are there. So you and I can go there and get some foods. That's what we do. You know, and you can buy your foods, maybe a couple cents more, but it's worth it, because either you're going to pay it now or pay thousands of dollars for messing up your body with bad food. I can't put it any better. Sorry. You know, that's how it is.
But the terminal is a new space and it has a lot more modern infrastructure. They've always had issues with flooding down there because they're closer to the lake.
Yeah.
So they've built it up. And I always encourage local Torontonians, you know, during the season when our farmers here grow and bring food to market, to go and check it out. Just go and take a look and support more of the local farmers, because when you help to support local farmers, as Noel say, you drive the cost of food down. Good food is so expensive.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Do I have any time just to say one thing?
Go ahead, Claudette.
A minute. First of all, thank you for what you are doing. I'm really excited. And what I was very excited about is the way that you started off talking about the United Nations Declaration and tying it in with the issues of Black health.
Yes. Yes.
And that, I don't know how many people got it, but that was so powerful. Because that is one of the most, I don't know how, in what way I can say it, but that is one of the biggest issues.
Yes.
You talk about apartheid and you talk about, but access to health
Yes.
and you touched it.
Yes.
And it had me thinking of ways that we in the church can address this issue.
Yes.
Because this is one of the
Absolutely.
things that I want to address in my church community, the issue of Black health. And this piece that you're doing, to me, is absolutely incredibly important. Just like with the indigenous people and their
Yes.
gardens and their access to their healing
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
So thank you very, very much.
Mm.
And I really appreciated it.
Thank you so much.
I had one very quick question. Would you be open to coming to like a local parish like St. Philip's and giving a presentation?
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Thank you once again, and thanks everyone for your comments and questions and insights. And you've given us a lot to think about and a lot of ideas for creative partnerships. And I hope that we can work together. I hope that this is the seed. I hope that this is the planting of a seed
Please.
for a greater flowering of community food access and food sovereignty. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us and giving us an opportunity to share our journey and our lived experience and what we are doing about it with your community. So yes, we welcome any connections and long-term work, because farming is long-term.
For sure.